Welcome back. Back to Too Much Future. It's the show where we talk about all the Fallout games. We're in Fallout 3. I'm Cameron.
I'm Michael.
And Michael, last episode we finished up Fallout 3. Finished up. I've got big, of course, on visual edited content and on other kind of stuff like audio content, for example. It's really great to have air quotes.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, very easy for people to see,
Mm-hmm.
understand what they mean. But we finished it up in the sense of we finished up the plot of the final quest of the main game. But as we said at the end of the episode, there's still a whole bunch of Fallout stuff to do, including a bunch of side quests, which we're going to do in this episode, and then all the DLC, which they're going to get their own episodes coming after this one. But in this episode, we're doing a few more side quests, and for everyone's benefit, we are not, I don't think, exhausting Fallout in these videos. Fallout 3, at least. We might be getting exhausted of Fallout.
Oh!
Whoa! 3 dogs. But no, yeah. So we're not, we're going to every little zone, not doing every little sub quest. There are all kinds of little sub quests, and there's one that's actually pretty cool that opens up here. But we're trying to hit, some of the major side quests here before we finish up the game. And tell me about Reilly's Rangers, Michael.
Reilly's Rangers is a quest that we have actually both wandered into before and then backed out of without getting. I think we both did. It was, I don't even remember which episode this was specifically. I think it was when we were looking for Galaxy News Radio, maybe. Because you're in DC, and we both ended up in a place where there was clearly some sewers and a hospital where something was going on, and there was a bunch of Talon mercenaries. And I remember specifically playing this part and being I think this is another quest. I won't finish it yet. And I think when I talked about it on the episode, you mentioned experiencing the same thing. And sort of the weird thing about this, at least, is that I suppose if I had just gone through with where I was, I would have, triggered this quest and gotten it. But you actually trigger it in a completely different way, or at least I did. I don't know how this went for Tonk. I went to one of the areas that we have not really touched so far. One of the areas of this game that the main quest doesn't make you go to for any reason, and this is something I talked about last episode. This is Underworld, which is the Ghoul City. In the Museum of Natural History. Did you go to Underworld?
Nope. Didn't do it. I'll just say really briefly, the way that I got this quest is I already had, from wandering around the Capital Wasteland somewhere, I had a distress signal that was like Reilly's Rangers distress signal. And I just turned that thing on. It gave me a quest marker to go and start the quest. So, I don't know, I just guess I was walking by the building or something, or walking in the area at some point during play, but that's how I got it.
Oh, okay. Well, I decided to check out Underworld because, as I said, it's a city, like a location, a settlement or whatever. One of the bigger ones, but also one that the main quest doesn't make you go to for any reason. I think the idea, because it is right on the National Mall, I think sort of the idea is that you'll probably wander into it as you're exploring. This is something, just to touch on things people have brought up in the Discord, because last episode I talked about how a lot of places on this map seem disconnected, and there is very much, I think, a sense that because of the way that this game has changed, or because this is not... This is a Bethesda game. It's an open world game. They are expecting you to find things through exploration that they don't necessarily think maybe they need to flag through character dialogue. Although something that was pointed out in the Discord was that Three Dog does mention some of these places. So if you're not listening to the radio constantly, then you're also not getting these breadcrumbs. So just putting that out.
And what's interesting, too, I guess, to kind of put on top of that, is that it's really interesting that the main quest doesn't send you to those places, and also doesn't really put you in proximity to them. Unless you're, super curious. Something that is interesting to me is that we have 2 additional vault locations that we haven't explored. I think too, and they are actually kind of in the regions where some of these side quests are. And I know that when I played the game originally, I got all those vault locations, and I was like, I'm going to all these vaults. I'm checking out what's in all of them. So, there's a little bit of almost like novelty to it in some ways. And maybe this is on my brain because we've been recording. People can hear this weeks after this comes out. But Danny and I have been recording the new season of Mages and Murder Dads, and we've been talking a lot about like how novelty works in the RPG, right? Like, what keeps you engaged when you see the same piece of content a second or a third time. And what's interesting for me is like these other vaults, or maybe even some of these locations that I remember but we haven't visited through this playthrough or we haven't brought up. They're things that are cool but not worth like the time commitment for me. In the sense of like spending 20 minutes making my way there and then doing it. And so in some ways I don't know, I think that if we I don't want to say this too strongly, but there are things that are really exciting to experience one time, maybe is the way I'll put it. And, I don't have any strong desire to see that one more time. Whereas I guess, in distinction to that, in Fallout 1 and 2, there were things I was excited to revisit a second time. So I don't know what the difference is there. The difference might be that I've now played, 4 first-person Fallout games from in the Bethesda mode.
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm just a little bit, there's only so much there, I guess.
But. Yeah. No, I mean, I was thinking like, one of the things that I remember most strongly about this game is something that we haven't touched on and probably won't, which is one of those extra vaults, the Gary Vault. Which is just, it was like a highlight of this game for me. But there's really no reason to go there because it's completely optional.
Yeah, and just I forget the exact explanation, but it's a vault that is full of one guy named Gary.
Yeah, it was the vault's experiment was they had like a cloning machine, and this one guy gets in control of it, and so it's just filled with versions of a guy named Gary.
And I think he just yells Gary at you, right?
Yes, and he because of course of how this sort of trope works, right? Each clone I think is like like not mentally all there, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're just like lurking around in the dark and they're just like Gary, and that's all they say as they like run towards you.
Mm-hmm. But here's the thing, that's it. You've just described, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like real high concept in some ways. But yeah, sorry to detract for that. But you're talking about this little hideaway zone that we haven't been to.
Yeah, I mean, so the Underworld is similar in that it is an optional area. It feels very high concept as well. It's very Fallout 2-ish actually, because it's as I said, it's the Ghoul City. Where the ghouls have kind of their own city is in the Museum of Natural History. And, because ghouls have a hard time out in the wasteland, they face prejudice from humans and things like that. They tend to collect here. And so one of the reasons it feels very Fallout 2-ish is because, first of all, that big concept, right? It's the ghoul place. But then sort of second of all, I think possibly because it's not connected to the main quest, you come into this place and it's a place with like its own stuff going on. Which is not exactly how Rivet City feels, or like Rivet City felt that way, but Rivet City was sort of very big for what was actually going on there. Underworld feels sort of more at scale. There's a couple people here, like, well, first of all, I come in and there's this like ghoul in a crappy salesman suit trying to sell some other ghouls what he calls Aqua Cura. Which is his version of the water that's now being pumped out by the Brotherhood of Steel at the Jefferson Memorial. That's for another quest. So anyway, that's sort of the first thing that I see. But you get into Underworld. There's like a doctor here named Dr. Barrows, who is doing like ghoul medicine, I guess. And there is a human woman unconscious in the back corner of his office, and that's Reilly. She's like in a coma or something. And you could ask about her, and apparently she like was found very injured, and she's probably part of some sort of like well-known mercenary group called Reilly's Rangers, and you can just be like, take her out of that coma. I want to talk to her. and he'll do it for you if you can like pass a speech check.
Hmm.
Um, and so you do, and she's like, "Oh dang, my group of mercenaries, Riley's Rangers, we were fighting some super mutants, and then we got trapped on, or like we fought them through this hospital, and then there were like some Talon mercenaries or something, and now the rest of my crew is trapped on top of this old hotel." They've been, sort of locked in by super mutants, and I used my last stealth boy and I snuck out to try to get help, but I was so injured that I passed out, and I was lucky that the ghouls found me. If you could, like, please go help my crew. And of course, that's what I agree to do, and then so that's how I get the quest Riley's Rangers. But in the meantime, just to mention some things about Underworld, in addition to Dr. Barrows, there's a like sort of hotel kind of area in much of these. In fact, like one of the reasons this felt Fallout 2-ish is that there's a ghoul lady standing out front of the Museum of Natural History who's your exposition NPC, who will tell you, like, this is Underworld, this is where all the ghouls live, here's why we live here are the people here. So anyway, Carol runs kind of the boarding house. And she has, this is interesting, she has a girlfriend or wife who is this other ghoul woman named Greta. And they have a ghoul child named Gob, who is in fact the guy who is back in Megaton, who we saw kind of probably maybe being enslaved. And Carol will tell you kind of like her entire history, right? She was a pre-war ghoul. She has, it's very similar to that one ghoul in Fallout 2, who saw the Vault Dweller.
Gotcha.
Right. She gives kind of her whole sort of history and like her memories of the war and what it was like turning into a ghoul and how she met her girlfriend and all this stuff. There's also a ghoul named Mr. Crowley, who is, his name is a reference to both Aleister Crowley and, of course, the song Mr. Crowley by Ozzy Osbourne. That is also a reference to Aleister Crowley. He'll tell you that he wants you to go kill some, like, ghoul bigots, but this is actually a bad karma quest line. And then there's also another ghoul named Azrakal. Yeah.
What?
I don't know. I don't understand. I think the implication is supposed to be he like took it off of the name of an exhibit in the museum or something. But he's kind of a mover and a shaker here as well, and he has a bodyguard who is another ghoul named Sharon, like the boatman on the River Styx. And he's been like mind controlled or something. Like Azrakal is very vague about this, but he is like, yeah, no, I have a contract that means he has to listen to whatever I say because he was like brainwashed when he was younger or something. So these are like two quests that I could have intervened in, but they're both kind of like negative karma quests, like because Azrakal wants you to kill Greta because he wants to take over. Again, very Fallout-y, right?
Yeah.
Azrakal kind of like wants, he's already, he owns like, I think the bar in Underworld, and he wants to own the boarding house as well. So he's going to have you take out the partner of the woman who runs the boarding house.
Dang.
Yeah. So it's very funny because last episode I was thinking, I know I talked about how desolate the world can feel in this game sometimes compared to what was going on in Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, and then bam, here in this completely optional area, unburdened by the main quest, you have these characters who have relationships, who are talking about other places in the world, who are sending you out into these places and asking you to come back. But also, I think it is worth considering why it is that the Ghoul City, because we've already been taught to understand that ghouls are kind of a race allegory in this fiction. Why are so many of the quests in the Ghoul City about doing crime? And why is it that, for instance, we know there are ghoul scientists, I've met at least two, why aren't they involved with anything that your father is doing, right? I think there are certain assumptions or implications being carried out here in terms of, like, I don't know, worthwhile association and worthwhile industry that maybe the game itself is not terribly aware of. Anyhow, that's a lot of stuff that is not at all the quest that we were talking about. But is there anything you want to respond to just then?
Well, two things, I guess. The first one is when you said ghoul child, I immediately thought like a little kid.
I wish.
Which I really had a lot of questions about, but you cleared that up for me. And yeah, the other thing is that I think what's kind of going on too when you're talking about the kind of racial allegory that shows up in Fallout 1 and 2 is that ghouls are, if they had an allegorical relationship to something at some point, right? This kind of universal oppressed figure or a racialized figure or whatever, kind of depending on what, how that shows up, that is basically obliterated in Fallout 3. During 2008, during the Obama era, this kind of notion of post-racial came into the forefront of a lot of public discourse. And I think that Fallout, the Bethesda Fallout games are not exactly like the poster boy for like post-racial ideology, but certainly they are a big, they carry the flag in that there just isn't any exploration of it whatsoever. I guess what's surprising to me is that the Fallout games have in their toolbox a way of talking about race. We've talked about ways that doesn't really work, or it's bad, or that kind of allegorization isn't sufficient for talking about those things, but at least they were, at least is maybe the wrong word, they were attempting to do something and to say something about oppression. Mm-hmm. The Bethesda Fallout games can't even get that far. They can't even kind of mount that as a critique other than through level design, geography, that kind of thing. The ghouls have their own city, right? They are excluded. They have their own zone. They don't really show up too heavily in the rest of the settlements in the wasteland where humans are. And so, but as far as I know, I mean, I haven't really gotten other than maybe one or two lines of dialogue from ghouls, maybe. I haven't really gotten the kind of in-your-face allegory stuff that's in Fallout 1 and 2.
Yeah, mostly here the ghouls they just talk about how much humans don't like them. Is kind of as much as that goes for. So anyway, yeah, Underworld, that's a place. But really, it is just a jumping off point for Reilly's Rangers, at least for Eleanor, which involves going back to that hospital that I mentioned, fighting my way through the hospital. There's like a girder that you take over to the nearby hotel where the rest of the crew is supposed to be. One of the other things that Reilly tells you is that one of her guys got killed, but he was carrying their ammo crates. And so she gives you, if you find him, right, here's the combination to open the ammo crates. And you find him in like a stairwell or something. And if you've talked to her, then you can get all that ammo. Hooray for you.
Yeah, I think the guy who gives the, what do you call it? Distress signal. I think his name's Butcher. Something like that. He explicitly is like, we're running out of ammo. They all talk like, or he talks like that for some reason. He talks like this. He talks like someone from an old-timey talkie film.
Well, it's because, like, after the bombs fell, they just think that that's how everyone talked. So, yeah.
Like a boardwalk carny.
Step right up and save us from certain destruction.
I see a super mutant back there who's got a warm quarter in his pocket.
But anyway, yeah. So it's a dungeon crawl, is what it is.
I was about to say literally the words dungeon crawl.
Yeah, that's just what this is, and it's not super interesting, but it is interesting insofar as it feels like I'm seeing assets that I haven't encountered anywhere else in the game, and so this area feels distinct, especially the hotel.
Yeah, I think the design of this whole little encounter, this little, I guess, dungeon, probably, I guess is the best word for it, is really interesting and neat and different from the rest of the game. You can really kind of see the fingerprint of whoever worked on it here. First, by what you were talking about, right? So you can go in the bottom floor of the Statesman Hotel, and there's an elevator, but you can't use the elevator to go up. And you, like you said, you have to go outside and then you have to go to a different building and go up it and then cross over a like a fallen radio tower, and that is so good. I like that so much because both in a general sense, because that's a cool thing to do. I think that works in video games when you can kind of like, look on the street or stand on the street, look up and be like, oh, I gotta get up there. Okay, how do I do that? And then you figure it out. I think that's like good feeling game stuff. But on the other, the kind of other part that's like that last little 5% twist that really makes it work for me is that you go across the girder and the door right in front of you is boarded up. And you can't go into it. And so you have to be like, all right, well, how am I going to get from this girder to a door that's actually openable? And it's not hard, right? You jump down like this little gap and go to the floor below. But it's this little kind of moment of like, this is not a bridge that someone has built, and this is not going to be convenient. This just fell, and you're going to have to figure out how to do it. It's this really kind of naturalistic little turn to it that's not particularly player-friendly. I think it's actually a little bit frustrating to be like, well, what the shit? Why did I cross this thing? That was my immediate feeling, because so much of this game is kind of given directly for you in that way.
It almost makes you think you did something wrong, because the game is
Yes.
usually so direct about this stuff.
100%. And so then you go in, and yeah, you're 100%. There's all these assets that we don't really get. And the design of it is very different too, because there are all of these basically health packs around. I mean, the game is kind of purposely setting up like you go through a floor, and then you can find a Nuka-Cola machine and a food like dispenser thing. And then you can get a bunch of supplies out of that, and you can replenish your health. And there's toilets and things like that where you can always do that in the game. But it really, I don't know. There's something about the design ethic here and the way that these things are placed and the way that they're put together. And of course, it's like a fancy hotel, so there's all those assets they were talking about. But for me, this feels like the vision of someone that was not kind of run over by anyone else. It feels wholly consistent and coherent with itself. And that's not something I necessarily think is happening across the kind of golden path in the main plot. I think a lot of weirdness and edges are filed off there. But this has got some weirdness and some edges. And I got lost in this place a couple times.
Yeah, and not in a frustrating way, because even when I got lost, I could tell pretty quickly when I was lost, and I could turn myself around. It felt, I don't know, the place felt practical.
Yeah.
Right. It had a bit of that. I've touched on this a couple of times at this point, but I think one of the things that makes Fallout work is that it plays on kind of like the player's expectations for social realism in certain ways. So things like, I have been in hotels before. How are hotels laid out? Right? If I am lost in a hotel, what do I do? What are the things that I look for that sort of like orient me? And so it's things like exit signs and so on.
The thing that I'll say about that too, just one last thing, is that not every game, that what you just said sounds like something that's easy to do, right? Like make a hotel that feels like a real hotel. It's not easy to do. And I've been replaying through The Last of Us 2 to work on this book chapter I've been working on. And it has a very extended kind of hotel sequence. And it's just terrible. Like I did not enjoy playing it when I played through it the first time. It's not good the second time. And it's because it is a fully naturalistic hotel, but with all this like game designy crap stuck into it, to where you have to do all these like enemy puzzles essentially and all this stuff, very The Last of Us kind of game design. And by taking the kind of naturalistic hotel that you're talking about and then cramming that into a dungeon crawl rather than like a series of encounter puzzles, I don't know. Fallout 3 just sinks the shot on this one. Like it really goes in a way that I was pleasantly surprised by.
Yeah. So I agree. And you get up to the roof, and the roof kind of feels different, right? It's so at the top of the hotel, as in many fancy hotels, there's like their upscale bar and lounge. And you do a super mutant fight in there, and then you get up onto the roof, and of course, because their fancy hotel lounge restaurant thing is right there at the top, like the roof was obviously their outdoor dining, so there's like a crumbling fountain out there and stuff. And this is where all of Reilly's Rangers are holed up, and you already said, they all have, so there's one named Butcher, there's one named Brick, I don't remember the rest, but that's the kind of thing. Like these are the characters they are, right? It's like Butcher and Brick and Hardcase and so on. And they're like, "Oh, thank God you're here. We need a fission battery, and we can get the elevator fixed, and then we can get back to we can escape here and get back to our like ranger hideout." So they send you back in to get a fission battery. They mention there's like an old Protectron robot in one of the rooms just inside, and so you go back in and you have to find that. You find the battery and you come back. One of the things that I can do, because I have found the guy who was carrying the ammo and I found, all their ammo reserves. I went around and you can give everyone some more ammo and they appreciate that. And then I hand over the fission battery and they start the elevator and we ride the elevator down. And then we leave the hotel and I fast travel to the closest place to their little, I don't know, base of operations is. I don't know if I'm supposed to be following them or not. It's not terribly clear, but I fast travel out there and I run to their base of operations. This is through some weird area of the game I haven't been to before, but there's a lot of radiation, and a lot of things are fighting. I think there might be like an Enclave remnant out here or something that's like fighting with some raiders maybe, or some Brotherhood of Steel people. The point that I want to make is like, I'm not paying attention. I'm just trying to get to the marker on my map. So I'm like running through this weird like emergent war zone. And then I get to their hideout and everyone's okay. Everyone made it. And Reilly's there. And she's like, thank you for making sure everyone lived. And then she gave me a suit of armor as thanks.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really funny to me about that hideout, because I kind of wandered my way there and had to do some like scamping, some like really avoiding combat stuff. What's interesting to me about it is there's so much signage for them around. Like there's a lot of like level design and kind of production design kind of stuff, right? So like the Reilly's Rangers symbol is everywhere, and you gotta go down these hallways and all this kind of stuff to get there, and you get into this big courtyard. And the big courtyard's like almost as big as the middle of the Pentagon for the Brotherhood of Steel. It's like a pretty big section. And then you go where they live, and it's like 7 bunks crammed into the smallest prefab room, and then like 2 people standing in the other room. It's really weird the way that the whole thing is set up, but yeah, that was the end of it for me as well. I only met Reilly there at the end, and Butcher will heal you up if you need him to.
Oh, thank you, Butcher.
It's pretty good. I think he'll do it for free too, so like you can always go get fully healed if you want.
Neat.
I took the gun, the minigun, and it was called like Ella or something. Mm-hmm. It has like a name. That's fun.
Yeah, and so I mean that's that quest, right? And I don't think it doesn't really. I think it's just sort of more background color, really, more than anything. It's like, yeah, no, there are factions here that are sort of not the Brotherhood of Steel, right?
Yeah,
there are other things going on in the Wasteland aside from whatever's happening with the main quest, essentially.
Yeah, one of the things you can talk to Reilly about is the Talon mercenaries, which have showed up a few times for me. They're just, I'm like a do-gooder, and they've tried to kill me a couple times now. And I guess what's interesting about it is like it seems like there might have been a quest here to like take out the Talon mercenaries or something like that, because Reilly is setting up that there's like a pretty big opposition. Like the Talon mercenaries are the the evil mercenaries, and Reilly's Rangers are like the good ones in the Wasteland. And so there's a lot of information you can learn about them and about the way they fight each other and all this kind of stuff, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it feels like, the kind of jagged edge of some cut content.
That was actually my thinking when you were describing like how small the Rangers bunker was. I was thinking like, oh, 100% there was, I think, going to be another sort of like quest line off of this. And then, nope, this is just where it ends now.
Yep. You want to talk about Superhumans?
Yeah, the Superhuman Gambit. I've been kind of looking forward to this quest because along with, like, for instance, the Gary Vault, this is one of the things that I remembered most strongly about Fallout 3. This quest in particular, because I think this is one of the ones where it leans most strongly into the absurdity and wackiness and kind of 1950s B-movie aspects of the Fallout universe.
Mm-hmm.
There's a town called Canterbury Commons over on the east side of the map, and if you I think Three Dog will mention, he'll talk about this on the radio, but if you happen to wander into it organically, especially if you wander into it organically in the way that I did, by which I mean from the rear entrance, right, the way you're not supposed to come in, um, you will wander through a completely empty and strangely desolate town before you get to the actual front entrance of the town and see the scripted event you're supposed to see the first time you come here, which is a woman in an ant costume and her army of ants, and then a man in a robot costume and his army of robots yelling at each other in the street. And saying, like, bizarre 1950s superhero type things about, like, you will not, I will not fall to your, I don't know, forces or what. I just, ridiculous stuff like that. You are immediately supposed to understand that these are like superheroes.
Someone please transcribe what Michael just said,
Yeah.
and then begin putting that in the speech bubbles in comic books.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly
Send
how they
us a
talk.
few of those. That'll be good.
I will not do a thing. So yeah, anyway, they are yelling at each other. It's like, I am the antagonizer, I am the mechanist. And then they start fighting, like they sick their robots and their ants on one another, and they continue talking, and it's really hard to hear what they're saying over the sounds of their robots and ants fighting. I feel like maybe they should have, if they were going to give these characters more dialogue, they maybe should have thought through the fact that I can't hear them. When also, I don't know how it worked out in your game, but like the robots kill the ants, no problem.
Yes, I was literally going to say that. The robots annihilate the ants because the robots are like high-level difficult enemies.
Uh-huh.
One is that like weird assault android that can like laterally move and fire missiles.
Yeah.
And the other ones are just ants.
Mm-hmm.
They're just ants. And when we talk to all these kind of characters, there's like Uncle Rowe,
Yeah.
who's like the mayor, basically.
Yeah, the people
And you
who
talk
live
to
in
him,
the
and he's
town.
like, "Yeah, we were hanging out, and the antagonizer showed up, and our town mechanic, and she would like stage these weird attacks on the town, and we would just kill her ants, and she would run away. And then our robot guy, our mechanic, he had a robot that was killed, and he vowed vengeance. And so now they were like fighting. It's really annoying. It's keeping the traitors away, and that's kind of the quest. As he says, "Do you think you could solve this for us? To figure out how to get away from it?" But it really is, to me, like when you look at it kind of zoomed out, it's like, oh yeah, there's just a woman with a bunch of ants who shows up occasionally, and she gets beat up and then runs away again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's annoying.
Yep. No, that's really, and there's like a kid in town who loves it.
Yes.
Like he just like, they're like, like, be careful when you're talking to him, like don't put any ideas in his head. But when you talk to him afterward, he's like so into it. He's like, it's like, oh, did you see what the mechanist did to the antagonizer? And he thinks about like, how could I like join them? How could I help them? And he'll also tell you like where their bases are if you talk to him. There's also one other guy, I think like his name is Joe Porter in this town, who you'll talk to him and he'll mention that he heard like some rumor that the antagonizer was this just a regular girl who had some sort of regular name. I didn't bother writing that down. But her entire family was killed by mutant ants, and that drove her mad. And now she's using the ants to like take out her vengeance on the rest of humanity. So that's a bit of important information.
Tanya Kristoff. And I was going to look that up. I'm going to look it up right now. Is that someone? Are the Kristoffs from the quest them?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I didn't think so either. I meant to look it up beforehand. I'm going to look it up right now.
Okay.
And let's see, supervillain. Boom. She's 27 years old. Nope.
Okay.
Nope. not related to, so you're going to have two giant ant quests, and one of them is going to explicitly be about how giant ants killed a whole town, and you're not going to hook these things up?
No.
Come on, Todd. Jeez.
Well, I mean, so to touch on something that I didn't touch on last time, I may have mentioned this, but I listened to a talk by Emil Pagliarulo, who was the lead writer for this game. And the talk was specifically post Fallout 4, and it was kind of like some things that they did for Fallout 4. But I listened to the talk because he goes over a little bit about what the Fallout 3 writing process was and sort of how things changed. And one of the very interesting things that came out of that little presentation he did was that during Fallout 3, Bethesda stopped using internal documentation between their teams because and that is not me like taking what he said and like being sassy about it. Like, this is a thing he straight up admits. He says their workflow process changed because what would happen is people would like programmers would like write stuff, it would get into the game, they would play test it, they would find out it didn't work in one way or another, so then they would just do an immediate kind of iteration or several immediate iterations, and it would be, by the time they were done, it would be so kind of distinct from what was actually in the design doc at the beginning that to update the design doc would mean to rewrite the design doc, and so they stopped keeping them. And that sounds absurd, right? But I think it explains to some extent exactly what you're talking about, which is like, we have two teams who are working on two giant ant quests, but they're not really talking to each other, and so there's no actual meaningful connection. There just happen to be two giant ant quests.
Yeah, and that's the sense, of people who have worked at Bethesda that I've spoken to. That I don't know anyone. Well, no, I know one person, I guess, who worked on Fallout 3, but I'm a little bit more familiar with people who worked on Skyrim, and that's the feeling that I had when talking to them about just generally, in very general terms, what development at Bethesda is like, where there's a lot of autonomy, for developers to work on their own stuff and kind of script their own stuff and request art assets and things like that. And so I'm not surprised to hear that with Fallout 3 that was met with or that when you get more liberty on one side, you kind of lose control on the other, right? A very classic, a Jeffersonian problem, perhaps. But yeah, I'm not shocked.
Yeah. So so that's sort of what we can do in town. As I said, you talk to the boy and he's like, oh yeah, the mechanist is in his robot lab on that hill on one side of the town, and then the antagonizer lives in some caves, or like her ant burrows on the other side of town, and you get a choice. You can go one of the other funny things is that when you're talking to people in town, there's a couple people here, like there's the woman named Machete who you can talk, when you talk to her, you can be like, I bet you're from Little Lamplight based on your name. So again, like we're seeing here outside of the main quest, a weird way in which this game is picking up the precise slack that I was noting before by connecting these places. Anyway, she's like, yeah, no, I'm the person who like kills people here, but I'm not going to fight the robots or the ants for whatever reason. But also, and I think she's one of the people who says this, but I know there are multiple people in town tell you this, you don't have to stop them both. I'm sure if you just stopped one of them, it would be all right. Like, just the weird way that the game is signaling to you that, like, you can complete this quest by just going after one of these people. I don't know why it does that so clearly and so strongly, because of course I'm going to talk to both of these people. But who did you go to first?
Why don't you tell me how this went for you, and then I'll tell you how it went for me. Okay. Because maybe your originary precepts are not shared. No, I don't agree with the claim.
Okay. So I am like, okay, there are two people I can talk to. Obviously, I'm going to talk to both of them. That's That's the Eleanor way. She must talk to everyone she can talk to. I go to the Mechanist first because I remember, I think the first time I played this, I went and talked to the Antagonizer first. So I go up the big hill behind the town. There's like a robot repair shop on top of it. And so I go in, and I think it's also worth noting by this point I have done another quest that I'll talk about in a little bit, where I have gotten the Lincoln repeater rifle, which is one of the most powerful guns in the game. So I'm just like murdering things so easily. Like I've also got I'm up at level 20 now. Eleanor has the perk I think called like Grim Reaper or something, which means that when I kill something in VATS, once like if I kill something in VATS, all of my action points replenish immediately when VATS closes. So I can just like wipe out rooms of things. So I go into this robot repair shop. I fight some robots. I find the back room where the Mechanist is, and he's in his robot costume, and he's, yelling weird superhero things. And then this is super strange. I can use the Black Widow perk to tell him that his fighting this ant lady is scaring the town. And the Black Widow perk is this thing that allows me to sort of like make sexy comments at NPCs to get my way. This comment isn't particularly sexy. It's literally something like, "Darling, your fighting is scaring the town." And then he's just immediately like, "What? People are scared? Perhaps I'm the villain here." Yeah. And so because of that, he gives up his life of being a superhero, and he gives me his Mechanist costume, and he resumes his former identity of the town mechanic. His name is something, it's like Steve Wolinski or something. And he goes back to town, and that's it, right? The Mechanist is no more. So technically I have completed this quest, and if I wanted to, I could have just gone back to town and talked to, I think, like Uncle Ro and finished it out. But as I said, no, I need to talk to the Antagonizer as well. So I go around town. I go into the boroughs. Like there's like it's like a little, it's the assets that they use for like the sewers. I don't exactly know why this little bunker is out here, but then you find like a secret entrance that takes you down into these tunnels, and then it's like earthy tunnels where all the ants live, and then you find the Antagonizer, and she's on top of her throne. And because I'm carrying the Mechanist's costume, the first thing she says when she sees me is like, you finally pried that meaty Mechanist out of his metal shell, like, give it to me. And I can ask her why she wants his costume, but Eleanor, being the kind soul that she is like, hold on, we need to have another serious discussion right now. Why are you causing so many problems for people? And I get this speech option to like remind her of her human name and tell her that, and it's like a very low chance of success. It's like 44%. But to like call her by her human name and be like, sometime like humanity isn't done for yet. Humanity can still be saved. And I fail that just incredibly hard. And she's like, humanity may not be dead yet, but I'll help it. Like, guards, attack. And then a bunch of her ants come out and start attacking me. And then I just, obliterate the ants one right after the other with my Lincoln rifle. And then I wheel around and I one-shot the Antagonizer in the head, and she explodes into a million bits. So then I go back to town and I'm like, hey, your problems are solved. And the quest is over.
I just went and killed the Antagonizer immediately. And this is why. I don't respect ants. I don't respect anyone who consorts with ants. The Mechanist would never exist if the Antagonizer didn't exist. Just fuck ants. I hate them.
Very interesting dynamic there. Like, what if the Joker preceded Batman?
I mean, what if the Antagonizer is Batman?
I mean, she is.
If you're the Mechanist, the only response to a mad world is to become mad and put a helmet on. Yeah, I just wasn't having any of it.
Yeah.
It seemed very clear to me what was going on here. Um, all of this is all foolishness, clouding up this child's wasteland brain. It's not good for him. No, so I just went in there. I was like, "Hey, antagonizer," and she was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I said, "I'm gonna smash you with this hammer," and I did it. And I think it really does have to do with that quest, them, and how much I got fire breathed on. I think Tonk has a like a genetic distrust of ants now. He accessed his genetic memory, of course, and went all the way back to the Temple of Trials, and his ancestor Tonk kicking those ants to death over and over again, and used that physical prowess to smash him up.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And then in between this and our last quest, I did one quest that you didn't do.
Yeah, I forgot. Sorry.
Yeah. And I don't even remember what this quest is called, but north of Canterbury Commons, there's a place called Temple of the Union. And if you get too close, the woman who is like perched at the window with a gun will stop you and holler at you. But again, because I tend to like do a perimeter around places before I go to them, I was approaching the building around the side when her like little flag tripped, so it like zoomed in on her, but she was behind a wall, so I can just like see her arm, and she's like yelling at me down from the ceiling, and it just looks like there's like a flapping elbow talking to me. But she is like, "Hey, what are you doing here? Blah blah, like, don't be crazy, don't be evil, whatever." I don't know. It's your standard like kind of thing, right? We are a group of people who are making sure that no one dangerous comes in here. It turns out that this place, the Temple of the Union, is everyone here is a freed or escaped slave. And this is where they have decided to hang out and sort of like fortify, because they're all being hunted by various slave owners and slave hunters. And you can talk to the guy who runs this place named Hannibal Hamlin, who has this dream of going, like, taking over the Lincoln Memorial and making it the new Temple of the Union, because he doesn't have enough space here to house all of the escaped slaves that he wants to, and he wants to have kind of a big symbolic kind of get, right? He wants to be able to take the Lincoln Memorial and make that into the place where the freed slaves can go because of the history of Abraham Lincoln and what they call the Great Emancipator. For some reason, Abraham Lincoln's head is here. Like, the head off the memorial is in this building. Hannibal Hamlin says that after he escaped, he found this building and he found Lincoln's head here, and that's how he knew it was a sign. And so that's why he initially set up his encampment here, which is very strange. If there's like a terminal or something somewhere that I could have read that might have hinted at or explained how the head from the Lincoln Memorial gets from the memorial to this place, that would have been really interesting, because as it is, it's just there. And you can walk.
It's kind of a Stonehenge thing. They, we don't really know how they did it, but we can presume that they piled up logs and then slowly rolled the head of Abraham Lincoln all the way there. That's a long way away, too.
It is. And it's a long way to carry this giant stone head. And you can ask everyone in this building who Abraham Lincoln is, which, again, raises just some of the weirdness of the writing in this game. Mm-hmm. I understand the necessity for the player character to, like, get certain key details, but to have every single character in this location, I can ask them the same question, which is, who is Abraham Lincoln? And each of them gives me, like, basically their own version of the same answer. It sort of boggles my mind in terms of thinking through, like, do they just want me to only ask a couple of these people and then never talk to anyone else? Whatever. The important thing, though, is that there's another guy here named, I think, Caleb, who is like their stonemason. And he wants a picture of the Lincoln Memorial from pre-war, so he can restore the memorial once they live in the Lincoln Memorial itself. Oh, the other problem is that slavers have taken over the Lincoln Memorial. I forgot that part.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Memorial?
Yes.
Slavers.
Yeah, so... Well, and this also, I think, very much touches on what you talked about, you talked about just a little bit ago, actually, with sort of the moment of 2008, and sort of... along with the post-racial thing after Obama's election, there was this really strong sense of Lincoln nostalgia. I remember being I was in
Some sort of project.
yeah, some sort of Lincoln project.
Some sort of, I don't know, Abraham.
Colonel.
Lincoln's project. Oh, I can use cigarettes to see the lasers of the Lincoln Project. Brother!
It's just that's it. This is the rest of the show.
Yep.
Yeah, so I remember like I was in undergrad at this time. I was in like a US history course. And I remember it was like the run up to Obama's inauguration. And I remember my history professor talking about how Obama was going to be sworn in on Lincoln's Bible, and sort of getting kind of like teary-eyed about that because, kids, if you're listening, I don't know how to tell you this, but for some reason, back in 2008, we thought the Bush years were as divisive as you could possibly get without there being another civil war. And so there was this real sense of like Obama as someone who was going to bring the country back together after the two Bush administrations. And he was compared to Lincoln in that way. And so there's a whole part of kind of like, there's a whole wave of Lincoln nostalgia here that I think is part and parcel of that Obama era politics. And they send you back to the Natural History Museum, which I've already been to. But I take a different door this time and I go into their, so at the Natural History Museum, in addition to Underworld, there's like all these other wings that you can't get into because the tunnels have collapsed. But all of the exhibits are about like, one is about, the American war machine during the Second World War, right? Like the American battles of World War II. And then the other one is about like the Operation Anchorage, right? When the Chinese in the Fallout universe invade Alaska, and then there's a counter invasion or whatever. The move to liberate Alaska. So there's those two things. And then there's a wing on the history of Abraham Lincoln, which I think is maybe I'll be generous, and I'll say that that's some funny satire. Right? I think that...
We found it.
Yep, I found a little bit of satire here, right? The idea that, like, welcome to the Museum of Natural History. It's, like, our gift shop, two things on wars, and then this hagiography of a president from 2 or 3 centuries ago.
It's like we're just... It's like, they've told us there's gold in them thar hills, Michael, and we went, and we don't find gold in them thar hills. It's difficult. It's like the plot of Deadwood over here. And but we're still out in that creek every single day in our waders. We got our little shaky thing to look for gold, and every now and again we find a little glimmer of gold in there. Mm-hmm. It pays for this week's whiskey. And then we're back out there one more time.
It'll get me through the DLCs. So yeah, you go into the Lincoln like exhibit, and everything's gone. Like it's just been ransacked apparently, but also it's filled with ghouls. So I kill a whole bunch of ghouls. Me and Fox actually. Fox is still here. But you have to get into like the back offices of this exhibit. And I guess it's like the Lincoln Center or something. Like, I don't know, the Lincoln Archives. And you get back there and you can find a couple of things. You can find like an Abraham Lincoln action figure. You can find Abraham Lincoln's hat, which of course I immediately put on. You can also find his gun, which I've already mentioned. So I have Abraham Lincoln's gun and hat. And then I found the picture that Caleb needed to restore the memorial. And that's great. So I go back to the Temple of the Union. I let everyone know that, that's all set up. And they're like, great, as soon as you can get the slavers out of the memorial, then we'll move in. So I fast travel back to the mall. go up to the memorial, and as I'm approaching, one of the slavers standing out front like stops me. There's like, hold on, if you're approaching, like, you need to do it from a certain direction. You need to follow me. Like, if you step on the steps, like the front steps of the memorial, like, they will shoot at you. And then I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll talk to you and see if there's like some way what I can do with this. Even though Eleanor canonically hates slavers, let's see where this goes. Actually, let's not, because the second this dialogue ends, maybe I step too close to the stairs because all of the slavers just start shooting at me. So I kill them all. And I go back to the Temple of the Union and I tell them, hey, guess what? Slavers are dead. And they're like, that's fantastic. We will... Well, actually, for some reason, I can't tell them that the slavers are dead. I can just tell them that I'm ready to move on the memorial. I think I encountered a small bug here, because then they're like, okay, we'll go to the memorial, meet us there, and then we'll make like a push on it, right? The implication being that I'm going to have to help them like through this firefight, even though there can't be a firefight because I've just killed everyone. So I fast travel back to the memorial, and no one shows up.
Oh,
no one's there. Like, I don't know where the people from the Temple of the Union are, and I just fast travel a bunch. And no one shows up, and there's like a little map marker. They're not sending, like, it's not telling me to go directly to the memorial, but to like the building just beside it, which I think is where I'm supposed to, like, meet all of the other NPCs before we have our last charge. No one's showing up. I go up to the memorial. I wait again. Still nothing shows up. I wait some more, and then one slaver just appears. I don't know if he was like locked in some level geometry or something, or if he was like stuck far away, or if he just like spawned in naturally, but like one slaver just appears, and then I shoot him. He's dead. I wait some more, and then all of the Temple of the Union people appear at the building next door, and then they move into the Lincoln Memorial, and everything's great. That's the end of that quest.
Well, sometimes you have to. I hope the game has like some sort of subroutine, right? Where it's like, if nothing happening, then spawn one slaver. Just see what happens. And it worked out for you this one time.
Yeah.
Well, what's the finality of it? They just get to live there now, and it's cool.
Yep, they're going to take over the Lincoln Memorial, and they're like, it's going to be a way station for escaped slaves.
Well, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah.
It's like a good thing. Okay. Well, you want to talk about this big ol'... Well, it's not really that big, but it's an interesting quest. Certainly a fan favorite, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it all starts with goddamn druids.
Yeah.
So if you wander far enough north, and it's kind of mid-map at the very north, you can find a geological aberration, let's say, which looks like someone used the like world geometry tools to just raise a cylinder of rock directly into the sky from the middle of the plains. Well, it doesn't make any sense.
It's the famous Washington D.C. caldera.
Yeah, exactly. The butte of the northern DC area. But so you go there, and it's pretty weird, and even if you just wander upon it without any kind of marker or anything, you're going to be like, well, I need to go find out what's there. And you walk around it, and it's pretty easy to find a pathway. And as you kind of go up this little rampy pathway, mountain path thing, you start seeing a lot of like lush trees and greenery. It doesn't look like anywhere else in the wasteland, really. It's odd looking, and so you bebop your way on in there, and you can see two people who are dressed in like animal skins with twigs hanging off of them. And they're druids.
Yep, they are straight up druids.
And they're called like tree tenders. Is that
tree minders? Is what
minders?
What this faction is called?
Yeah, it's what they call themselves. They're we are the tree minders, and you have to.
We are not druids. We don't know what druids are. We're tree minders.
We mind the trees, and we don't know what is good and what is evil, and going one way or the other is equally bad. They're really the horseshoe theory police when you think about it. The radical center of the tree minders, of the druids. But you meet this guy named True Father Birch, and he's like, hey, he told us, capital H, he told us that you were coming. An outsider has appeared. And he says I got to bring you to him, basically. And he's like real excited, and he seems to be like tree pope here, something like that. He seems to be an important guy. He's the tree father, of course. And you kind of wander around with him a little bit, and he says, hey, look, here's the deal. There's some delicious sap you have to drink, and if you drink this sap, and you go in this place, and, it's like a beautiful woodland grove, right? It's some straight-up Oblivion,
Yeah.
Like Druid's Grove-looking stuff.
I was going to say, it looks like, would you like a preview of our assets for Skyrim?
Yeah, yes. There's going to be like a harpy here in Skyrim. And so he says, look, you got to drink some sap if you want to meet him. And, based on our other show, Just King Things, and our bonusodes, I'm thinking, he who walks behind the rose. Mm-hmm. There's a demon here. There's going to be a demon, or a devil, or a creature, or a villain, or a bad boy, or a bad guy. And I said, you know what? I'm going to drink that sap. Let me see that sap. Let me do it. And I have like a vision quest, kind of. Like a little micro vision quest. Uh-huh. And presumably I like rip all my clothes off and pass out in the middle of a field.
Presumably.
And I wake up and there's like a tree there. And I actually kind of wander around, not really seeing it to begin with. And I'm like exploring this little zone. And I eventually see it and I walk up to it. And it's a tree that's got a face on it. Mm-hmm. What'd you think about this tree with a face on it?
Well, first of all, damn, Harold got big. Because this is...
Yeah, it's Harold.
Yeah, it's our old friend Harold. From Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. The sort of the not ghoul guy. Because he was a human who got exposed to FEV. And he was like on the... way back in Fallout 1, he was on a quest with a guy who would eventually become the Master, and he got exposed to FEV there, and he became this weird, like, not quite ghoul creature. And he was always human-sized, except now he seems very big. He seems much bigger than he should be.
Yeah. Well, so last time we met him, he had a twigling sticking out of his head, named... It's named Bob, and he talks to it, but its name's not Bob. Or no, its name is Bob, but he calls it Herbert all the time.
Yes.
And Harold explains that basically that Bob got so pissed off at being called Herbert all the time that he grew into a full tree and like rooted him in place. Mm-hmm. And so my assumption is that the bigness is like all the tree in there.
I suppose so. That was just my thought. As I was like, man, I wonder if like Harold was actually just going to slowly get bigger until he was going to be as big as like Liberty Prime, right? Alternate
sort of
Fallout.
Bigger Harold theory.
Yeah, bigger Harold theory. Also, Harold doesn't sound that great. He never sounded great. He always had a bit of congestion, a bit of coughing. But he's talking slower now than he was in the previous two games. It's he says as much to us. Harold's not wild on the whole being alive thing anymore.
Yeah, or being a tree. And I unfortunately, I want to think this is the decision, right? Like he's speaking slowly because, the world is wearing on him. He's turning into a tree against his will, right? He says his organs have been pushed around everywhere. And then he says, I don't quite know where I am on the inside anymore. And he says, well, I guess we never really do. And I was like, wow, Harold, that's some real Merleau-Ponty kind of shit going on in your brain. But I think that he talks slowly because of the Ents from The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Really unfortunately, but I think that's the connection being made there, which is sad to me. But he does actually tell you, if you ask him about all this stuff, he'll tell you about all of what happened in Fallout 1. Doesn't really tell you about Fallout 2, but he didn't really have as much of a plot important, deal
Yeah.
in Fallout 2. So I guess I forgive him for that. But he, as you said, he's not excited about being alive anymore. And he says, I don't want to be a tree. I'd rather, well, actually, this is kind of weird. I guess Bob would still live.
Mm-hmm.
Because he says, look, all my organs are getting pushed around. My heart is deep below me in the ground, like in the roots of this tree, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like you to go smash that bad boy.
Yeah.
And free me from tree life.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that he's tried to express this to Tree Father Birch as well, and basically the entire Tree Minder cult. He's tried to tell them his opinions on things, but they are so set on him being a god because he brought green things back. Right, this is this special place that they have to protect. They are so set on him being a god that they never actually listen to him. They only take things that he says and they interpret them. They treat everything he says as a coded message that they have to unravel. So he's asking them for help, and they're just they're taking it as some sort of weird pronouncement or sign that they need to figure out.
Yeah, they just refuse to actually listen to the words he is saying, and they turn everything into an allegory or into a lesson. And it's actually really interesting for a side quest. I think this is the only side quest, as far as I can remember, where the kind of remove a HUD and prevent you from doing anything script starts.
Maybe.
Which is used, regularly in the main plot line, right? But so when you're okay, Harold, I will go and solve your problem, but you got to go down in these caves. So you have to scoot your way into a roundabout, and so you got to walk by Tree Father Birch, and he's the only name I wrote down for this whole place, but he's talking to a woman, and they basically have his wife, and they have competing interpretations about what they're supposed to do here, and about what the outsider could do for Harold. And Tree Father Birch says, hey, you should use the sap and just put the sap into Harold, and it'll make him happy, basically.
Yeah, it will stop his growth, is sort of the outcome there. Because the thing that is causing the Tree Minders sort of stress is that Harold / Herbert / Bob they've created this beautiful little green grove around them, but time passes and things grow outward. So on the one hand, either eventually this is going to get big enough that they won't be able to keep other people out, or they should be taking steps now to control the growth. That way they can keep it sort of protected and sort of hidden away forever. And there are sort of competing interpretations based on that. But that's what Tree Father Birch wants to do, is to just stop the growth as it is.
Yeah, and then the woman she thinks, oh, actually, it should probably be shared with everybody. And so she gives you a liniment to accelerate the growth. To make it, make Harold, make the wasteland bloom. What's interesting, somewhere in one of these conversations, maybe with the previous conversation with Tree Father Birch, I actually had a dialogue option that was flagged as Life Giver, which I'm assuming just means I've completed the main quest. And I could be wow, things sure are doing well here. I guess presumably because the water's getting better or something. I don't know. Big question mark. If you stand in the water here in the Oasis, your radiation goes up. So
yeah,
obviously it is. It's not as good as it could be. But so you get the sap, you get the liniment. So and basically you've got an option of keep Harold alive, but don't allow him to grow anymore. Keep Harold alive and make him explode in growth. Keep Harold alive and do nothing, or kill Harold.
And there are two ways of killing Harold.
There are two ways. Are they both flagged or
I'm not sure. Well, one of them is the one that Harold asks you to do, which is go find my heart and destroy it.
And that's really simple. This is a little dungeon. You go through it. There's a bunch of mire lurks here, but there's nothing interesting or complicated here. You just go and you eventually find the heart.
Yeah. The other way you can do this, which I guess is, as with many kind of evil things in Fallout, is kind of spontaneously generated, right? It's not a thing someone tells you about, but it's just kind of basically, the second you finish talking with Harold, you can go out and start talking to the tree minders about, like, hey, if I wanted to burn down this entire place, how would I go about that? Like, that's essentially what you're doing, right? You can talk. There's like a little kid there. Her name is Yu. And she's like, I was born here and whatever. But she will tell you about how, like, Harold doesn't like fire. And if he were to be caught on fire, that would be really bad for him. And also this entire grove. So if you just wanted to be a straight up, like, chaotic asshole, that's something you could do here is you can, they're like flame throwing weapons that you have. And you can just, like, start burning everything if you wanted to. Not what I did.
Not what I did either.
I went down and I fought those Mirelurks, and then I found Harold's heart, and then I killed it.
Yeah, same. It seemed to be respectful.
Uh-huh.
That seemed to be the most respectful thing I could do, was to respect Harold's wishes and, pay off 100 plus years of help from Harold.
Yep.
He did me some solids in the past, kind of. Well, not really. He created the master, so he might have actually kind of been the guy to really mess up the world. Thinking about it, just really kind of running that through my head. But you know what? I like him anyway.
Yeah.
So I did what he wanted me to.
Yeah, and then the heart like explodes. It's very gross, and then you come out into Harold's Grove, and the tree father is there. And he's like, oh, you might think that I would be very angry at you, but actually, he told me everything in his final moments, and for the first time I actually listened, so I think it's cool now that you killed my god. Because I know he asked for it. And that's kind of the end of the quest, really?
Yep, that's it.
Yeah, I think I got, like, if you... I'm sure you get like other bonuses for the other choices, but for destroying Harold's heart, I got you get like a damage reduction perk or something.
Yeah, it told me I inherited Harold's skin. Which seems bad.
Yeah.
I don't think I want that. But
and I think the other thing to consider here, sort of metatextually, is how this quest scans in the midst of the Bethesda Fallout reboot project, and sort of It is hard not to see this as kind of a way of sending off the previous two games.
Yeah. And it is weird, too, that it's, in some ways, it's kind of closing down some options for, more West Coast games. Because, we didn't say this before, but it's kind of a big leap of the imagination that Harold is here.
Mm-hmm.
Last time when we saw him, he was in California or whatever. And so it's a little bit weird for it to be like, yep, there's Harold, here he is, remember, haha, Fallout friend. Whereas, I can imagine a universe where the Enclave is here. That makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
They're a nationwide conspiratorial, organization. Brotherhood of Steel, there's a whole logic for, how they got here. But Harold's just a dude. He's just a ghoul running around, so... That's a little bit more. And so, in the kind of reading that you're talking about, that reading is even more, I think, in the front of my mind, because they brought him here just to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Or they brought him here for you to interact with him and make choices about how he is integrated or not into the Fallout 3 East Coast plotline.
Right. Right. And there's this, precisely this very interesting question of are we Harold doesn't want to be alive anymore, right?
No.
So are you, the player, going to make Harold this beacon of the old Fallout games? Are you going to stop him here, keep him sort of, to yourself, or are you going to force him to grow more? Are you going to force him to expand beyond what he wants or what he's capable of doing? Or will you let him die on his own terms and then sort of face the future? Right, and I think that these are all kind of ways of querying what is it that we want out of the future of Fallout now that we've kind of put the previous two games to bed. Because I can't not look at this quest without thinking that that's kind of what it's intended to feel like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And in fact, just to sort of tie some things off, I already said at the beginning that it's very weird how all of these kind of little side quests, in many ways, address precisely the concerns that I had about the main quests that I talked about in the previous episode. And so we have in this one game kind of two competing visions of what playing Fallout is like. And if there is one thing that in fact seems to be a uniting feature of Fallout games, it is exactly this kind of weird tension between discontinuous perspectives on the same thing. Like, if that makes any sense at all. But every Fallout game kind of feels like two different games pulling you in different directions.
You know, the question we've asked often is Fallout satire, but the question we should have been asking is Fallout dialectics?
Mm-hmm. Sure,
well,
why not?
The apotheosis of of Marxian theory is the Fallout franchise. Shepherded by Todd Howard.
Yep.
Noted Marxist.
You can find me on Twitter at Warren is Dead.
You can go to @RangeTouch on Twitter to find out all the things we're up to. You can help us by going to Patreon, patreon.com/rangetouch. The link is down in the description below. You can go there and help us on our drive to 1025 or drive for 1025, one of those two things.
Just get us 1025.
Yeah, we're trying to get to 1,025 different subscribers. When we get there, we will begin a podcast series that's free for everyone, where we read through Homestuck.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know anything about it. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael knows all of it.
I know quite a bit of it.
And so this is kind of a, I don't know, maybe like a Virgil and a Dante, or perhaps a... well, no, that's probably it. Probably a Virgil and a Dante.
I was really interested in seeing what your second pair was going to be.
I was trying to think of that Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle rewriting the Inferno, but I couldn't remember the name of the writer in that. Yeah. But Mussolini is his guide.
Uh-huh.
Spoilers for that book that came out 50 years ago, written by like right-wing libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, some sort of I'm trying so hard. I can't come up with another one.
Okay.
Some sort of Donald and Goofy to my Sora.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I am both Donald and Goofy. And you will be Sora.
Mm-hmm. Some sort of Roxas to my nominee.
See, the thing is, right, you've already got so much Kingdom Hearts in you that the Homestuck will just... It will be like second nature, I think.
Mm-hmm. Some sort of Dale Cooper to my Dale Cooper.
Then who's Chet Desmond?
Don't think about it. We're not thinking about it.
Okay.
We don't talk about that.
Anyway, if you
We're not going to talk about Judy.
If you like hearing us talk about Fallout, or if you listen to our other show, Just King Things, where we talk about Stephen King books, this series on Homestuck might be right up your alley, because we're going to read through Homestuck and talk about it in very similar ways, and sort of its history, how it works as an object. What does the text itself do? How does it do it? And what was that experience like when you were reading it live, as I was?
Like I said, I have two things about that. So if you find that interesting, we're just looking for patrons and not a number amount. So if you want to go and you want to chip in $1 a month, that's going to help us get to that goal. So if you're excited and you don't have a lot of spare change, that is A-okay. If you can manage $1 a month, but at $3 a month, you get access to a podcast feed for this and our notes for Game Study Study Buddies. And at $5 a month, you get some extra podcasts. So if you want to hear more of us and more Range Touch, there's a lot of good value in there for you. The other thing I want to ask you, Michael, here at the very end, right before we leave, is, how long before we do a Twin Peaks show? It's almost inevitable. It's inevitable, right?
It's inevitable. 25 years.
What? What year is this?
Oh, man. I mean, maybe I think Twin Peaks would be a maybe post-Homestuck project.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, it's purely speculative. Like many things, like the future. Michael, what's the catchphrase for this show?
Until next time, war never changes, but Fallout sure does.
Everything changes.